It's 1989. In this leafy suburb of Alexandria, close to Washington, lives Colonel Fletcher Prouty. We came here seeking answers to the question, who killed Martin Luther King?
When there's an assassination, you have to have a lone nut, because a lone nut can kill somebody for no reason. If you admit that 3 or 4 people were involved, or that there was, to use an overworked term, conspiracy, then you have to say, well, the conspiracy had a reason. Well, they don't ever want to face that reason. What was the reason why Kennedy was killed? What was the reason why King was killed? By having a lone nut, you don't have to ask that question. And I think all of us that study these assassinations ought to forget some names totally. One name is Oswald. Another one is Sirhan. Another one is Ray. Forget them. Those poor guys were staged into this program. They had nothing to do with the assassination except be the fall guy. And as an assassination studier, student of assassination for 25 years, I tell you frankly, I could write the whole book on assassinations without using any one of those names. They're not relevant other than as patsies. You know, I don't proclaim that I'm an expert in Martin Luther King's assassination, but I do know things about it that pertain to this cover-up business, which is so important. From either point where the shots might have been fired, and it's been alleged that some were fired from a room on the 2nd floor and others were fired down behind some bushes on the 1st floor. In either case, the intervening trees had been chopped down. Now, can you imagine this James Earl Ray going out with a hatchet and chopping these trees down before he fired the shot? That's done by people who prepare the ground for the shooter, whoever he is. See, well, that's as good an example as you'll find about how things are done ahead of time. Martin Luther King was registered on the 1st floor. Somebody went there ahead of time and told the landlady of the motel that he didn't want to be on the 1st floor, he wanted to be on the 2nd floor. Nobody in King's party had made that contact. You see, that's the advanced planning. Then afterwards, all the things that happened, the chase of Ray halfway around the world and all the other things that came up, are a cover plan which is so complete that even to this day, no one has broken the system completely, and you can't get it into the courts anyway. You see, none of these cases really get into the courts, and when they do, they're very abnormal cases. Consider the case in Los Angeles about the killing of Kennedy. The people most proximate to Kennedy at the time he was killed have never been questioned yet. I traveled to another country to talk to a young lady that was almost leaning on Bobby Kennedy at the time he was shot. She can tell you how he was killed, but the courts have never talked to her. This cover-up pattern is enormous, and it's very effective. It closes everything down.
What's the technique for an assassin once the assassination has been completed? Where do they go? How do they operate then?
Well, obviously the first thing is to bring in the hitman or the hitmen. Usually it's a triangulation affair so that you're sure you have the guns to do the job. You can't always say where your victim's going to be, so you place the guns in the right place and you're ready for it. But, you know, that's the easy part. Then you have to get them out of there. I think if you study, as we have hundreds and hundreds of photographs of these scenes, you'll find that there were certain people, for instance, that didn't run from the area, stood there casually, nothing happened. They have the assurance they're going to be picked up at the proper time and removed from the area. Now, undoubtedly, they're the killers. They're too smart to run and draw attention to it. They're too smart to jump in a car that speeds away. If there is a car that speeds away, that's a cover story. It's like the white Mustang. It's not the one that really did the job. And the press releases that are immediately put out lead you to the man in a 6th floor window, while the man that really did the killing is right down there on the street waiting for somebody to pick him up casually and walk off. And just consider either of the Kennedy cases or the King cases, the thing you notice most is that the police stood with their hands down and did nothing. There were no on-the-spot detectives. There was nobody really looking into the ballistics. There was no one checking any of the things that the police would have gotten into in the first place. So there's where you begin to see the cover-up patterns. Somebody has told the police department, stay away from this. Now, they don't tell them that way. They say, look, because this was Mr. King in town, we have a special group of Secret Service or a special group of whatever here. And so the police think, well, it's covered, we're not needed. But in any event, they're away. Now, in Dallas, I know for a fact myself that there was an Army unit we intended to use in Dallas for protection on the streets, simply to watch everybody, watch the windows, watch everything. The commander of that Army unit had received a call, very simple call, saying, we don't need your unit. He knows there are other units, so he thinks I'm going to use somebody else's unit. The next day he found out there were no units there. Well, it's too late then, you see. Who made the call to that colonel?
The first person who arrived on the balcony after Dr. King was shot was an undercover policeman. We later discovered that he was working for the CIA. Is it possible that that man could have been placed by the CIA into the Memphis Police Department as a trainee?
Well, I think really to explain why this certain policeman would be the first man on the balcony and that kind of thing, you might turn it the other way around. He might have been the member of the Memphis Police Department that the CIA had trained, or somebody else from the government, FBI had trained, and here we're using a generic term more than we are a specific one. The training they get enables them to perform special jobs like this. For instance, think of the other cases when Bremer shot Governor Wallace. Immediately, an investigator went into his apartment in Milwaukee. When an airplane crashed with Howard Hunt's wife in Chicago, something like 70 FBI men immediately went to the wreckage of that plane. I don't know of any other airplane where even any FBI showed up, at the wreckage of it immediately. So when things like this take place, there is training behind it, and it's very skilled training, and it's training with key people. And that's what I meant by saying that by taking a large number of men as, quote, instructors and putting them in the Inter-American Police Academy, you can train members, select members of police establishments from all over the United States, but then they're taught special methods and everything, and mainly they go on your list. They're your contact man. And the contact man is the one who does these things that are, as you described, where the man goes up on a balcony. The first person there seemed to know why he was there and when to be there, things that look like magic otherwise. Why was he there, you see? He had advanced knowledge.
From your experience in government, Fletcher, do you think it conceivable that a secret intelligence unit could have planned and carried out the assassination of Martin Luther King?
You needn't have to include the word intelligence unit. It's just a secret unit. And there's no question about it being a unit. Anybody that thinks today that either Kennedy assassination, either one of them, or the King assassination, and others that we might go into, were done by individuals, just doesn't understand the business at all. The easiest way to see that the program is laid on in a team effort, carefully planned and carried out, begins after the murder. That the cover-up program, the things that take place, the lawyers that are hired, the courts and the way they go after it, the Warren Commission itself, things like that in all these cases, just show you right away that there's a good-sized program operating these things, not 2 or 3 individuals. There's just no way. Now, where these reside, where they begin, who says let's do it, that's pretty hard to know because you're not ever going to find that out. That's, again, part of the package. It's concealed. But the work is carried out by people who are skilled and know these jobs, and they perform this work internationally. It's not just on the streets in this country. If the decision is made at some level or some point that involves an assassination, either within the United States or outside, the group involved, first of all, is in a very high position, and secondly, very limited in numbers. In most cases, the people that are called upon to do this have a good bit of training. They have the skills, they have special equipment, and they have a lot of support. And the thing that people should understand is the support they need really comes after the shots have been fired. How to get them out of there and how to cover the thing so people don't realize that a team of gunmen did the job. I certainly knew of plans that were intended to bring about an assassination. For example, in the case of Castro. So they created an organization called Mongoose. Mongoose was the cover word for it. Now, the objective of the Mongoose program was to assassinate Castro by any means. We even used mafia hitmen, skilled mechanics, skilled killers. We used poisoned things. We used all kinds of... There's a lady that used to be a friend of Castro's, I think, that said she was being sent back there to feed him some pills or something that would kill him, and on and on and on, all kinds of things. But here's what we need to get from the format of that story, is that Mongoose is an organization created by the United States government to commit assassinations. Never mind Castro. It was created for assassinations. Now these people are selected, trained, equipped for that purpose, to get in there and shoot somebody and get out. And the getting out part is the hard part. That's where they need the rest of the organization. The hitmen are probably 4 or 5 experienced people that can do the job from any angle with any weapon and do it right. But to get them out of there and what the patterns are and how you're going to do it is a very intricate thing. So you have to have a trained program. And in this case, we called it Mongoose. Now, there's no reason to believe that Mongoose ended when somebody decided that, well, we're not going to kill Castro this year, we'll let it go. But Mongoose is an assassination incorporated organization.
Can you just tell us what you know about the CIA's use of hypnosis in manipulating operatives?
And every effort possible is going into the mind control business. And the CIA is very active in that. Our MK Ultra program was pressing the limits of mind control.
To your knowledge, has it ever included hypnotizing assassins who would then carry out the job without really knowing what they were doing and be programmed to do that?
Well, as you know, hypnosis is used to make people do a lot of things. And the business of mind control with respect to conditioning assassins and conditioning people to other things is universal. We all know that. And there's no... the action of these people who are involved in assassinations, everything from Hinckley to James Earl Ray, we'll say, and others like that, Sirhan, and all these people are not normal. Something odd happened to them because, first of all, 20 years, 25 years have passed, and some of these people are still in this state that is not exactly normal. I think they were submitted to pretty heavy doses of certain kind of drugs or medicines, and probably to hypnosis and other devices for mind control. It's a very advanced art. So
it's not an entire coincidence that Ray had books about hypnotism in his apartment when he was, at the time that after the assassination they were found, and also Sirhan had books about hypnotism as well, I believe. Do you think that's not entirely coincidental?
Well, and of course, this business of having books in his apartment and having kept a diary and all this, I find that is simply part of the trade, part of the assassination trade. All these lone nuts that kill somebody all keep diaries, and they're all very strange little diaries and that kind of thing. I think that's all created. I don't think they had the diary. I think that I've read many of them very, very carefully. I agree with Gore Vidal that they appear to be written by some central office that knows how to write these diaries. So the books they kept, the things they went through, are really immaterial to the basic facts of the assassination.
Can you tell us something about the secret team? Who are the secret team? Whether there are people still around today that you knew in the 60s? And what kind of activities they were involved in?
Actually, the book I wrote called The Secret Team is autobiographical. It explains my 9 years' work in the Pentagon in this kind of business. Actually, I had been in intelligence type work long before I came to the Pentagon. I was at the Cairo conference in 1943 and the Tehran conference in 1943 when there were some very important secret operations carried out. I was in the Soviet Union in 1944 and in Turkey in 1944. So that through all this period, beginning way back in the 40s, it was clear that even though I was working close to men like Winston Churchill, I lived right across the street from him once when he was in Marrakech and so on, you would see that they would be carrying out some kind of instruction. I've worked in a room like this with Alan Dulles, right at home with him, with John Foster Dulles right there, and listened to the two of them talking about how we're going to do this or how we're going to do that. And then I've seen John Foster Dulles pick up the telephone and call somebody overseas. And you realize they're taking an input, taking instructions. They're not the top men. There is a high cabal, the words that Churchill used, that runs things. Now, we'll never describe those people. Their greatest strength is their anonymity, and they know that. Now, at lower levels, there are secret teams in the sense that governments or parts of governments don't stop them. As we see through this whole Iran hostage exchange thing, The Germans were involved, the Israelis were involved, the Swiss were involved, the Swedish were involved, Otto Palmer was involved, the British were involved, all around the world. The South Koreans were involved. Well, what kind of a team is there that can be assembled to do a job like the hostage exchange and selling arms to Iran and so on and so on? That's not any part of one government, but it's a most effective organization. So the closer you get to this type of operation and the more years you spend in this kind of operation, you recognize that there is a secret team that even governmental structures does not encompass. It's a very powerful, large organization. The people at the top are faceless. We will never know them. And I don't put people like Ronald Reagan or Winston Churchill or Franklin Roosevelt at the top. They're people above them.
I was looking through the peephole of the glass. As I was watching Dr. King, I saw him look over toward the boarding house. And then whenever he looked back, like he was going to look into the parking area, that's when he come up off of the grating, and that's when he was shot. I felt very bad inside that this had to happen in Memphis, Tennessee.
The weight of world condemnation came down on the city of Memphis on the 4th of April, 1968. This was the killing of a major world figure. How could they have allowed it to happen? There were even suspicions that the Memphis authorities were accessories to the murder and involved in a cover-up. The man convicted of King's murder, James Earl Ray, still protests his innocence. In this film, we show new evidence that there was indeed a conspiracy and that the trail leads into the heart of government itself.